2021 is the 30th anniversary of Oliver Stone's The Doors. Let's take a look back at both the band and the film. The Doors are one of the most musically exploratory bands to emerge from California during the turbulent mid-60s. But while most of their contemporaries were busy celebrating the summer of love, the music of The Doors dwelt in altogether darker and bleaker waters. Others sang of freedom and togetherness, but The Doors sang of violence and guilt. This music, coupled with the mystique surrounding Jim Morrison, a poet obsessed with sex and death, and a man possessed to finally realise self-destructive urges, has ensured that the sound of The Doors continues to influence generations of listeners and musicians decades later. I always remember two things that struck me while watching The Lost Boys in the Adelphi Cinema on Abbey Street all those years ago. One of the songs from the film, and who was that on the poster in the Vampire Lair? The song was People Are Strange, credited to Echo and the Bunnymen. However, afterwards I learned it was in fact a cover, and that the original was indeed by The Doors. Intrigued, I sought out records by this unknown band. Remember, this was the late 80s, no web, no Spotify, but I eventually started to get their albums through the many wonderful, though now unfortunately long gone, record stores around Dublin city centre, first on cassette, later on vinyl. And then I started to devour the books. No One Here Gets Out Alive, The Illustrated History, Jim's Own Poetry, The Lords and New Creatures, Wilderness, The American Night. The first website I ever created was one on The Doors back in 1997. In January 1990, Guild Films in London announced they would be distributing the new Oliver Stone film entitled The Doors, the story of the late Jim Morrison, poet, lyricist and vocalist. It was to begin filming in the spring for Carolco Pictures. As time went by, information would be released giving us more details on the film. For example, to replicate Jim Morrison's voice, permission was given to use The Doors master tapes so that Val Kilmer could sing along. In addition to hearing the actual words, Kilmer was given a precise breakdown of the way Morrison actually delivered his lyrics phonetically. Kyle MacLachlan, Ray Manzarek, is a classically trained pianist. He was able to master the moves needed to sync with ease and to provide a great stimulus for the other actors. Frank Whalley, Robbie Krieger, plays the drums. The transition to guitar for sync purposes took hard work, but with the coaching of Elliot Randall and the benefit of Robbie Krieger's input, Whalley was able to accurately portray the guitarist. Kevin Dillon, John Densmore, was the least musically trained, but worked 5 days a week for 2 months with coaches Bruce Gary and Alan Schwartzberg, and during production with John Densmore, to handle the moves and style needed for a realistic portrayal of the drummer. There were full band rehearsals in order to get the actors into the environment, in addition to Oliver Stone's 2-week rehearsal period for the film. Dillon, MacLachlan and Whalley played 9-hour days in 3-hour shifts, 6 days in a row. Kilmer would rehearse vocals and phrasing all day. Since the early 80s, the Morrison story came to be regarded as the movie that couldn't or shouldn't be made. So many names were linked to it. Directors like William Friedkin, Brian De Palma, Francis Coppola and Martin Scorsese. Actors over the years considered were John Travolta, Jason Patric, who of course was in The Lost Boys, Keanu Reeves and Tom Cruise, to name but a few. Then, finally, in early May 1991, barely able to contain my excitement, I arrived at the Savoy Cinema in Dublin to watch it. Unfortunately, the weakness of the script did not give Val Kilmer the dimension that Morrison deserved or that history demanded. Oliver Stone showed Jim to be a mean, self-destructive, self-indulgent drunk. While that may be true, he was also witty, charming, intelligent and articulate. Stone's portrayal is an ugly and unfair one. Sure, The Doors had a dark side, but Oliver Stone took it way more seriously than they ever did. There was also far too many liberties taken. For example, Jim met Pam at the London Fog while they were a resident band, not on the beach. Jim did not quit film school, he graduated with his degree. Joel Brodsky took the shirtless pictures during a Strange Day photo shoot, not Gloria Stavers. Patricia Keneally did not have a cocaine blood-soaked orgy with Jim. Patricia was not in the shower room in New Haven, she hadn't even met Jim at that stage. The Doors stopped the car company using Light My Fire for their commercial, so there never was one. The Doors never left Jim alone at Warhol's factory because they were never there to begin with. There was no knife fight between Jim and Pam at the Thanksgiving dinner. Most of the film is based on the myth, the perception of who Morrison was. Instead of focusing on the man, the music, the words, we got Oliver Stone's fantasy. And this from the man that gave us Midnight Express, Salvador and Platoon. The least that we could have expected was a bit of realism. Artistic license is one thing, but the film was just downright disrespectful. The film, production-wise, is excellent. Painstaking attention was given to the smallest detail. Millions were spent recreating the Whiskey A Go-Go, Patricia's apartment, the Sunset Strip, and sections of San Francisco. But the most surprising was when we got to see the deleted scenes, which included Jim singing with Rick and the Ravens, which was Ray Manzarick's first band. There's an entire scene that leads up to the Miami concert where Jim and the faux doors, as Manzarek used to call them, are on a plane heading to the auditorium. Extended scenes of the court case and outside Ray's house just as Jim leaves for Paris. The best deleted scene, and I can imagine the original ending, is just after the screen fades at his grave in Père Lachaise. Jim walks into a room backstage, goes over to the other doors smiling. They walk to the stage and perform Roadhouse Blues. We see Indians dancing around Jim. Screen fades to white and we hear Jim saying, "Indian, Indian, what did you die for?" Indian says nothing at all. What a perfect ending that would have been. All these scenes and more show the human side of Morrison. I always felt that's why they were left out, because the myth, the fantasy, is more appealing to most than the sensitive and flawed man that he was. According to Ray Manzarek, Bill Graham, Doors concert promoter and producer of the film, after seeing the film, rang him up and apologised for how bad it turned out. Robbie Krieger acted as a consultant and very quickly distanced himself before the film was released. Oliver Stone says if he could go back and change one thing, he would change Patricia Keneally's character, as he didn't like the way he portrayed her. Patricia Keneally said the baby scene was a cheap farce. She called it hurtful. Oliver Stone called the making of the Miami scene a carnival of souls. Robbie Krieger said that the Miami scene was very close to actually what happened. Oliver Stone says he based the movie on what he was told, yet both Ray Manzarek and Patricia Keneally said that despite all the interviews they gave him, he ignored everything they said. Stone added, "It was a beautiful experience for me. Perhaps I didn't capture the way Jim was, I don't know. I never doubted him. I miss him very much." In July 2019, a 4K final cut of the film was released, with Stone trimming almost 3 minutes of footage from the original. Ultimately, 4K or not, though technically a very well made film, it is not a good one. Val Kilmer did the best he could with what he had to work with, but Jim Morrison deserved so much more. However, in 1991, it did introduce a whole new audience to the music of the Doors and bring their catalogue back on the shelves in stores. For this, I suppose, we should be grateful. And 30 years later, their music is still widely available. The one thing that the Doors' vision cannot portray is that wisdom comes with having lived into your 30s, into midlife and into old age. That perspective never came to Jim, like so many other artists before and after him who chose not to burn the candle at both ends but with a blowtorch in the middle. Jim, though gifted, paid a dear price. Jim's message was act now, search later. Life is a journey, but any journey will be painful. Life is pain, love is pain, and fear prevents people from experiencing life, from accepting what the Doors ultimately come to realise, that we are all just riders on the storm. Jim Morrison is not dead. His spirit lives on, in his music and in his lyrics, shining with radiant brilliance, a fusion of light and dark made diamond, bright and eternal. "Cancel my subscription to the resurrection," he sang. "Not likely, Jim. This is not the end. For the many people around the world every day that discover the Doors' music, the ceremony for them has just begun."
Thanks for watching. Until the next time, Hailing Frequencies closed. If you liked what you saw, please hit the like and subscribe button, and don't forget to hit the bell too. Thank you.